I wasn't looking for trouble when I bought the land. All I wanted was peace. 2 acres of quiet outside the city. A place where I could finally build my own home without neighbors breathing down my neck or rules taped to my front door. I had spent the last 10 years working IT for a mid-level cybersecurity firm in Phoenix, saving every bonus check, driving the same beat-up Honda, passing on every vacation just to afford a place like this. When I finally signed the paperwork, raw land just outside of Meadowbrook Hills, tucked beyond a creek and half a mile off the main road, it felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. The property was technically adjacent to a gated community, but not a part of it. No HOA, no dues. No rules, just mine. That's why I chose it. And that's why she hated me. Her name, though I didn't know it yet, was Karen Whitmore. President of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, tall, sharp-nosed, with bleached blonde hair that never moved and a voice like a dial-up modem. She came with the neighborhood, like a feature. Nobody asked for but couldn't uninstall. I met her 3 days after I started clearing brush. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was hauling cut branches into a rented dumpster when I heard tires crunching gravel. I turned around, sweating through my t-shirt, and saw a pearl-white Lexus crawling up my makeshift driveway. She stepped out in spotless beige slacks and wedge heels on dirt. That alone should have been the red flag. "Can I help you?" I asked, brushing bark off my jeans. She didn't smile. "Are you the owner of this land?" "I am," I said, grabbing the deed from my truck. "Just closed on it 2 weeks ago." She didn't even glance at it. "You can't build here," she said bluntly. "This land falls under Meadowbrook Hills jurisdiction. We have strict architectural guidelines and permit requirements. You'll need to submit plans to the HOA before any construction." I blinked. "Ma'am, this property isn't part of Meadowbrook Hills. The boundary line ends a quarter-mile south." She crossed her arms. "We consider this part of the greater community." Consider isn't the same as own. This land was never annexed. No HOA covenants, no restrictions. I made sure of that before I bought it. She narrowed her eyes like she was trying to see if I was bluffing. I wasn't. "You'll still need to submit plans," she snapped, turning on her heel. "And remove that dumpster. It's an eyesore." She got back in her car and drove off without another word. I thought that was the end of it. God, I was naive. The next day, someone slashed my tractor's tires. 2 days after that, I got a visit from code enforcement. Anonymous complaint about unauthorized land disturbance. Then the fire department. Same complaint, new name. Then animal control. Someone claimed I was hoarding dogs. Each time I showed my permits. Each time they left, mildly annoyed to be dragged out here for nothing. But it wasn't just the agencies. It was the neighbors. People I hadn't even met yet. I caught 2 men in golf shirts, trespassing to take photos for documentation. A woman walking her poodle. Let it crap in my driveway and walked, off like it was a statement. And one night, just before midnight, I heard the unmistakable sound of nails being dumped across the access road. All the while, I kept building. Foundation poured. Framing started. I even managed to get electricity hooked up. Every step forward felt like a middle finger to the silent war they were waging. But Karen, she didn't stay silent. She escalated. It was late October when she called the cops. I had just pulled in after a hardware run when I saw the cruiser parked near my gate. 2 deputies, hands on hips, watching my build site like it was a crime scene. Karen was standing beside them, arms flailing in that trademark I pay taxes fury. I walked up calmly, clipboard in hand. "Can I help you, officers?" The older deputy, Rodriguez, glanced at me, then at Karen, then back at me. "We got a call about illegal squatting and unlicensed construction." Karen cut in, voice shrill. "He doesn't belong here." "He's living in an RV with no sewer hookup, no inspection, no HOA approval. This entire setup is a code violation." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "You got proof of ownership?" I handed him everything. Deed, permits, temporary utilities waiver, the whole file I kept in my truck just for days like this. He flipped through it, nodding slowly. "Well, looks in order. You're not breaking any laws I can see." Karen's face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before. Somewhere between rage and embarrassment. "You can't be serious," she hissed. "He's desecrating the community." I finally looked at her. "My land, my rules. Rodriguez gave a half smile. Ma'am, unless you have a restraining order or a new law on file, I suggest you leave the man alone. She stormed off, but not before turning to me and saying something I'll never forget. You'll regret this. You have no idea who I am. She was right. I started digging that night, not with a shovel, but with a keyboard. I found out who Karen Whitmore really was. A former real estate agent with a long list of complaints. Got fired from her brokerage for forging signatures on a listing. Sued twice by former clients. Settled both cases out of court. Then somehow became HOA, president by default when the previous board quit over her micromanagement. But that was just surface level. What really interested me was the money trail. Meadowbrook Hills charged $300 a month in HOA dues, with 86 homes. That's over $25,000 a month. And yet their common areas were falling apart. No new amenities. No recent maintenance records. The HOA financial reports? Vague at best. The website had a login page for approved members, but nothing public. That's when it clicked. She wasn't just drunk on power. She was hiding something. And now I had a new mission. Not just to finish my home, but to bring her down. Not with noise. With evidence. The first step was getting inside. I created a fake identity. Michael Denton, real estate investor from California, interested in buying a property inside. Meadowbrook Hills. I found a FSBO listing online and scheduled a tour. Karen, being Karen, insisted on meeting all prospective buyers personally. We met at the clubhouse. She didn't recognize me, shaved the beard, wore a suit, different glasses. She talked endlessly about how tight-knit the community was, how they protected property values, and how outside influences were a constant threat. I nodded, smiled, acted impressed. Then I asked about the HOA finances. She stiffened. Oh, that's handled by our treasurer. Monthly summaries are available to members. Mind if I see one? Just to be sure I'm investing in a stable community. She hesitated, then laughed. You're thorough. I like that. She handed me a paper copy of a summary that was vague as hell. Thousands marked under miscellaneous maintenance. No itemization. No contractors listed. Just numbers. I took a photo of it when she wasn't looking. It was enough to confirm my suspicion. She was embezzling HOA funds. Probably had been for years. I could have stopped there. Could have gone to the papers, the city, even the state's HOA ombudsman. But that's not how this story ends. She didn't just try to ruin my build. She tried to ruin me. And now? Now it was her turn. When I left the clubhouse that day, I wasn't Lucas Hale anymore. I was Michael Denton, out-of-state investor with too much money and too many questions. Karen had taken the bait, hook, line, and corrupt little sinker. She even gave me a brochure for Meadowbrook Hills, complete with glossy pictures, of trails that didn't exist anymore, and amenities. That hadn't been open in years. That alone would have been laughable if it wasn't, for the fact that she was funding her fake paradise with real people's money. I spent the next week turning my makeshift cabin into a base of operations. Satellite Wi-Fi, solar backup, noise-proofed walls, and a little room in the back that I started calling the vault, where I pinned every piece of information I had about Karen Whitmore and her crooked HOA empire. There were 4 major folders on my wall: money, power, crimes, leverage. And I was about to start filling all of them. Money. I went after the budget first. Those vague financial statements she gave me, they were breadcrumbs, and I knew how to follow them. I filed an anonymous request under the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act, which forced HOAs to provide financial transparency upon written demand by any interested party. Legally, she had 5 business days to respond. On the 6th day, I got a cease and desist letter instead, signed by Karen, on HOA letterhead, claiming I was engaging in harassment, even though I had used a P.O. box and never once contacted her directly. That's when I knew I was onto something real. I paid a buddy from my old firm $300 to file a formal complaint, with the State Housing Division under Michael Denton's name. Then I made sure the local HOA Facebook group, which Karen had previously banned me from, got a screenshot of her violation. 10 likes, 5 comments, all neighbors. They were starting to turn. Power. Karen didn't run Meadowbrook Hills. She owned it. Her little HOA board was nothing more than a shadow cabinet of yes men. 3 members, all hand-picked. One was her cousin. The other two were neighbors she kept. Quiet with landscaping, discounts and favoritism on variants, requests. I watched them during board meetings, which she streamed on a private Zoom link. She controlled every vote, every motion, every amendment to the community bylaws, and most importantly, every fine. I dug through publicly available county court records and found 34 liens filed against homeowners in the last 4 years by Meadowbrook Hills HOA. Almost all of them settled out of court. Almost all of them for small, infuriating infractions, an unapproved paint color, a broken fence, grass over 4 inches tall. Most people paid the fines, some paid thousands. Because if they didn't, Karen would file a lien, destroy their credit, and threaten foreclosure. All perfectly legal if the HOA followed due process, which she didn't. She forged complaint photos, backdated notices, faked board vote records. I found proof in her digital trash. Her official HOA email was tied to a public domain, which meant she was vulnerable to certain metadata leaks when sending mass emails. Rookie mistake. A friend of mine, ex-pen tester, helped me clone her mail headers using legal OSINT tools. That got me date mismatches, and those got me leverage. Crimes. The real smoking gun came 2 weeks later. A young woman named Jessica Tran emailed me after finding my fake Reddit thread. HOA president extorting homeowners illegal options. Thanks, Reddit. She said her parents, Vietnamese immigrants in their 60s, had been forced to sell their house below market value after Karen fined them into financial ruin. Jessica had tried to fight back, but every lawyer she called said the HOA was within its rights. I asked for documentation. She sent over 400 memobai worth of scanned fines, letters and emails, including one marked confidential, where Karen offered to waive the final lien if the family signed a non-disclosure agreement and vacated the home within 14 days. That wasn't just unethical, that was coercion. Jessica gave me permission to use it. Now I had something explosive. Leverage. With all the pieces lining up, I needed one final element. A way into Karen's inner circle. A way to shake her from the inside. That came in the form of her nephew. Tucker Whitmore, 27, glorified man-child. Part-time pool cleaner, full-time dirtbag. He bragged constantly on Instagram about being connected. Wore HOA polos like they were armor, and drove around in a Ford. Raptor paid for by dues money, though the HOA budget said security vehicle rental. I ran into him, literally, while jogging near the golf course trail. He clipped my elbow with his truck mirror. Didn't stop. Didn't apologize. Just smirked and peeled off like a 12-year-old. So I followed him. He led me straight to a small strip mall 3 towns over, where he spent the next 45 minutes in a closed vape shop with blacked-out windows and a camera taped over with a Band-Aid. My guess? Drugs? My plan? Bait. I planted a GPS tracker under his truck's bumper later that night. The next morning, I knew exactly where he'd be. I walked into the vape shop at 9:37 a.m. and asked for a Tropical Thunder. Cartridge, the guy behind the counter, squinted at me like I was a cop. I'm looking for Tucker, I said. Tell him it's about his aunt. He came out 2 minutes later, annoyed and hungover. I don't talk about HOA shut, he muttered. I'm not here to talk, I said, pulling out a folder. I'm here to deal. I showed him one photo, him passed out in the front seat of his Raptor, surrounded by zip bags and vape pens that didn't look FDA approved. Then another, Karen's budget report listing. His $400 a month for youth community wellness programs, which apparently included his truck rental. He went pale. What do you want? Access, I said. One meeting, one conversation. I sit in on the next board review, quietly. He paused. And then what? Then I disappear, he agreed. He was dumber than I thought. The board meeting was held on a Thursday night in a borrowed elementary school classroom. Karen opened with the usual thank you for attending line, then launched into a slideshow of improvements. I sat in the back, baseball cap low, pretending to be Tucker's legal advisor, which no one questioned. Halfway through the meeting, she brought up me. Next item, she said, clicking to a photo of my property, zoomed in and distorted. Like some kind of horror movie villain's lair. This unapproved structure remains an issue. The individual has refused to comply with community standards. I recommend we move forward with escalating actions. Someone raised a hand. Isn't that land technically outside HOA boundaries? Karen's smile thinned. We are reviewing potential annexation options. I laughed, out loud. Everyone turned. Karen's eyes locked on mine. You have something to add, sir? I stood up slowly. Nope, just enjoying the show. She tilted her head. Who are you? I took off the cap and smiled. I think you already know. The room went dead silent. The next 24 hours moved fast. I uploaded everything, the forged fines, the fake budgets, the coercion letter from Jessica, to a secure drive and sent it to 3 local news outlets, the State Housing Department, and every resident in Meadowbrook Hills with a working email address. Then I posted it all on Reddit, Nextdoor, and a blog I made in her honor, KarenExposed.net. Traffic crashed the site in 6 hours. By morning, she was trending on Twitter. By noon, her Lexus had been egged. By evening, she had resigned. But I wasn't done. Because justice, real justice, doesn't stop with public shame. I pressed charges. With Jessica's help and a housing rights organization, we filed a class action lawsuit against Karen and the HOA board for fraud, coercion, and abuse of power. Within a month, her accounts were frozen. Her passport was flagged, and her nephew had flipped entirely to avoid jail time. The state attorney general opened an investigation. The HOA dissolved. The liens were reversed. And my land? Still mine. Untouched, free. Sometimes I sit on my porch at night, looking out at the hills, the stars, the silence. I think about Natalie, my sister, the one Karen made miserable when she lived in Meadowbrook Hills 5 years ago, the one who moved away, broken, after. Karen fined her into bankruptcy over a garden shed that was 6 inches too tall. The one who killed herself in an empty apartment 2 years later, drowning in debt, shame, and silence. Karen never even remembered her name. But I did. And now everyone else will too. Some people think justice is a gavel slam or a guilty verdict. They think when the bad guy falls, the lights go down, and the hero walks off into the sunset. I used to think that too. But real justice? It's messier, slower, it lingers. And when the smoke clears, it leaves you standing in the ruins wondering if you won, or if you just outlasted the explosion. Karen Whitmore was gone. The lawsuit was public. The evidence was overwhelming. HOA residents who had once whispered about her now screamed for her head. The Attorney General's office froze Meadowbrook Hills' accounts. State investigators combed through years of her paperwork. It took 2 weeks for them to issue the warrant. Fraud, extortion, misappropriation of funds, witness intimidation. They found nearly $180,000 misused under her leadership. Travel expenses, contractor kickbacks, security vehicle, leases that funded her nephew's truck and a $900 a month wine subscription labeled. Executive meetings. She was arrested quietly at her lake house trying to wipe her devices. I saw the mugshot on the local news. Karen Whitmore, 52, expression tight, hair frizzed, staring down a legal system she'd once manipulated like a marionette. They denied her bail after the DA argued she was a flight risk. But I didn't feel relief. Not yet, because the damage she'd done still echoed. 34 families had paid fines they couldn't afford. At least 9 had been hit with liens. Jessica's parents had lost their home. Natalie had lost everything. And the worst part? The rest of the board claimed they didn't know. Cowards, all of them. But one of them wasn't just a coward. He was a problem. Enter Daniel Marks, vice president of the HOA, former accountant, ran a landscaping company that had received nearly $40,000 in contracts from the HOA over 3 years. No formal bidding process, no itemized invoices, just checks with his name on them. The audit turned up his name 5 times, yet somehow he wasn't arrested. When I asked why, the AG's office said he cooperated early. Translation, he flipped on Karen before anyone else could. He was trying to save himself. And more than that, he wanted the neighborhood back. 2 weeks after Karen's arrest, I got a letter. Hand-delivered. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in a dull serif font. We know what you did. Don't mistake one victory for immunity. The community will rebuild, without you in it. There was no signature. But the paper smelled faintly of clove cigarettes. Daniel smoked clove cigarettes, subtle as a sledgehammer. I didn't respond. But I did install motion-triggered floodlights, 2 new cameras, and ordered a Belgian Malinois, puppy from a friend who trains working dogs for the sheriff's department. His name was Kilo. Best partner I ever had. The threats didn't stop there. First came the sudden inspection. Notice from the county about unpermitted structures, even though my build was legal and documented. Then came the fake Google reviews for my IT consulting business. All 1 star, claiming I was a scammer, a thief, even a sex offender. They tried to choke me financially. Same tactic Karen used. But I wasn't just a target anymore. I was a weapon. I launched Phase 2. If Daniel wanted to rebuild the HOA, and word on the street said he did, then I needed to make sure that structure collapsed before it could rise. First, I dug into his landscaping business, Mark's Green and Clean. I pulled business licenses, tax records, contractor invoices. Turns out Daniel had been double billing, charging the HOA and homeowners separately for the same jobs. Invoices dated the same day, same amount, same labor. I packaged that up and sent it to the HOA attorney, representing the community in the class action. Then I sent it to every homeowner on the email list I still had access to. Then I posted it anonymously on the Nextdoor page under a burner profile called, "Not Your HOA." Daniel tried to deny it. Then the screenshots came out. Then a whistleblower, a former employee who said Daniel paid him cash under the table to avoid taxes and insurance. That did it. The community turned on him too. The last standing board member resigned 3 days later. Now Meadowbrook Hills was leaderless. No board, no president, no vice president, no treasurer. Just angry homeowners, a mountain of litigation, and a failed HOA waiting to implode. And in the middle of it all, me, the guy who didn't even live in their community, the guy whose land wasn't even on their map. The offer. 3 weeks later, I got a knock on my cabin door. Jessica Tran stood there in a black blazer, holding a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. "They want you on the transition committee," she said without a smile. I blinked. "Excuse me?" She stepped inside and dropped the binder on my kitchen table. The homeowners voted to dissolve the HOA permanently. But legally, they need to elect a temporary oversight group to handle the transition, final budgets, communication, asset liquidation, legal closure. I raised an eyebrow. "And they want me?" She shrugged. "Half of them think you're a hero. The other half are terrified of you. Either way, they know you won't steal from them." I poured 2 coffees and sat down. "You think I should do it?" She looked me in the eye. "I think you should finish what you started." I agreed. 3 weeks. Just enough time to clean up the books, make sure people were paid back, and formally end the HOA. It was supposed to be simple. It never is. On the 2nd week of the transition period, we discovered a bank account nobody knew about. It was registered to Meadowbrook Hills Community Reserve Fund, but Karen had created it personally. No board approval, no public mention. Guess how much was in it? $92,400. All dues money, all hidden. Jessica froze the account, notified the Attorney General, and updated the civil case. It was the final nail. Karen now faced federal charges for wire fraud and financial concealment across state lines. She took a plea deal 3 weeks later. 12 years minimum, no parole before 7. The day I found out, I sat on my porch with Kilo at my feet, whiskey in my hand, and a storm blowing across the horizon. Not just a weather front, a clean slate. Closure? There's a strange emptiness that follows a mission like this. You plan so long, burn so hot, push so far, and then suddenly it's over. The villain's in jail. The system you fought has collapsed. The people you tried to protect finally have a voice. And you're just there. I don't regret what I did, but I'll be honest. I don't sleep as well as I thought I would. Sometimes I wonder if I became the very thing I hated. If I broke too many rules in the name of breaking hers. But then I remember Natalie. And I remember Karen laughing about how some people just aren't cut out for this neighborhood. And I remember every voice she silenced. Now they're loud. Now they're free. And now? Now I'm just a man on a hill, building a home no one can take from him. Just when I thought the nightmare was over, the phone rang. Late one Thursday night. While Kilo snored on the rug and the rain hammered the roof, I stared at the screen. Unknown caller. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Lucas?" The voice was soft, trembling, familiar. It was a woman, but not Jessica. Is this Michael Denton? Depends who's asking, I said, setting my glass down. My name's Amanda. Amanda Rivera. I hadn't heard that name in years. Back in Chicago before Natalie got sick. Before I left the city for good. Amanda had been my client, a single mom trapped in her own HOA hell. She'd disappeared after her house burned down under mysterious circumstances. What's going on, Amanda? Her voice cracked. It's happening again. A woman like Karen, worse maybe, running the show here in Brighton Heights. People are scared, Lucas. I don't know who to trust. My jaw tightened. I'd promised myself never to get tangled in another HOA mess. But when someone from your past calls for help, especially someone you once failed, you don't hang up. The next morning, I booked a flight to Denver. Kilo came with me, silent and watchful. I wasn't just chasing a story anymore. I was chasing closure. Brighton Heights was smaller than Meadowbrook Hills. Tighter knit, but the tension hit me the second I stepped out of the cab. Neighborhoods lined with white picket fences, perfectly manicured lawns. And in the center, the HOA clubhouse, big, beige, and looming. At the local diner, I met Amanda. She was thinner, more worn, but her eyes had the same fire. She handed me a manila envelope stuffed with documents. "Meet me at the community center tonight," she said. "There's a board meeting. You need to see for yourself." The meeting was worse than I imagined. The new HOA president, Margaret Ellis, was a stone-cold tyrant. She cut off homeowners mid-sentence, ignored bylaws, and slapped fines like they were candy. One resident, an elderly veteran, got a $5,000 fine for parking his classic truck, illegally, though he had a permit. Margaret smiled as she read the citation aloud. I felt a rage simmering beneath my calm exterior. Amanda leaned in after the meeting. "People say she's worse than Karen, and she's connected. City council, police, even the media. This place is a fortress." I nodded. "Looks like the fight isn't over." Over the next few days, I worked quietly, digging into public records, interviewing neighbors, and building a new network of allies. Kilo and I walked the streets, cameras in hand. Every day, the pattern was the same. Fear. People too scared to speak out, but I could see the cracks. A misfiled document here, an unapproved expenditure there. The same signs I'd seen before. One night, a man slipped me a note at the gas station. "Watch your back." No signature. But the handwriting was familiar. That's when I realized this wasn't just about HOAs anymore. This was personal. The note burned in my pocket as I drove back to Amanda's place. "Watch your back." Simple words, but heavy with menace. Who knew me well enough to send a warning like that? More importantly, who wanted me to stop? That night, I stayed up until 2 a.m. reviewing the Brighton Heights HOA documents. Margaret Ellis wasn't just a dictator. She was well-funded. Campaign contributions from local developers, silent partners in construction companies. A tangled web of interests that stretched far beyond the neighborhood. The next day, I met with Amanda and a small group of homeowners at a local coffee shop. Their stories spilled out, fines for unauthorized landscaping, threats of eviction, even sabotage of personal property. One woman, a single mother of 2, showed me pictures of her fence torn down overnight. "They want us gone," she whispered. "Make room for their new luxury condos." I looked at Amanda. "This goes deeper than HOA rules. It's about real estate profits and control." She nodded. "And if we don't fight back, we're done." We started documenting everything: video, photos, written testimony. I helped set up a secure online group where neighbors could share anonymously. The fear was still thick, but the courage was growing. Then came the call that shook everything. The Brighton Heights police wanted to talk to me. They said there were complaints of harassment filed against me, anonymous accusations of trespassing and intimidation tactics, a thinly veiled attempt to shut me down. I knew Margaret was behind it. At the station, I sat across from Officer Harris, a good cop stuck between orders and his conscience. He warned me to be careful. Powerful people don't like to lose. That night, my cabin was broken into. Nothing stolen, just a message spray-painted on my door. "Leave or else." Kilo growled low, eyes scanning the darkness. I knew then the fight was no longer just about justice. It was about survival. The spray-painted warning wasn't just graffiti. It was a declaration. I felt the weight of it when I woke up the next morning. Kilo stayed glued to my side, his ears twitching at every sound. I needed allies, fast. That's when I thought of Marcus. an investigative reporter for the local paper. He'd covered Meadowbrook Hill's scandal and had a nose for stories no one else dared to touch. I found him nursing a burnt-out espresso at the diner. "Lucas, I heard you landed in hot water." He smiled grimly. "We're in the same storm." We talked for hours. He had connections, sources inside City Hall, the police, even some of the developers. He told me Margaret Ellis wasn't just a HOA president. She was a political puppet, controlled by a shadowy developer named Elliot Crane. Elliot Crane. The name sent a chill through me. Crane was known for bulldozing neighborhoods to make way for luxury high-rises. His fingerprints were everywhere. Marcus and I formed a plan. We would expose Crane's operation, starting with Margaret. But first, we needed proof. I went back into the neighborhood, this time with a camera crew Marcus arranged. We caught Margaret taking a thick envelope from a man in a dark suit. Cash, bribes, proof of corruption. That night, Margaret confronted me outside my cabin. Her smile was cold, but there was a flicker of fear. "Lucas," she said, "you don't know what you're up against." I looked her in the eye. "Neither do you." Then came the betrayal. Jessica Tran called me the next day. Her voice was low and urgent. "We found out Daniel Marks has been leaking information to Margaret's people." My blood ran cold. Daniel. The man I'd exposed in Meadowbrook. He was back and working for the enemy. I realized then this was bigger than me, bigger than Brighton Heights. This was a war. Kilo growled, sensing my tension. I clenched my fists. This ends now. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that Brighton Heights wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a chessboard, and everyone was a piece in someone else's game. Margaret Ellis was the queen, moving pieces with ruthless precision. Elliot Crane was the unseen hand, pulling strings from the shadows. And Daniel Marks, that snakein', was the wild card. Marcus and I met in a cramped hotel room, laying out all our evidence. "We have cash bribes, double-crossing board members, and a developer who's bought half the city council," I said. Marcus nodded grimly. "This is bigger than we thought. But if we time it right, we can bring the whole operation down in one blow." Our plan? To crash the upcoming city council, meeting where Crane was lobbying, for a new zoning law that would demolish Brighton Heights. We'd release all our evidence, documents, videos, testimonies, live, forcing the city to act. The night before the meeting, I sat on my porch, Kilo resting his head on my knee. I thought about Natalie, about Jessica and the families who'd lost so much, about how far I'd come from the quiet life I wanted. Morning came fast. The council chambers were packed, the air thick with tension. Margaret sat smugly in the front row, flanked by Crane and a handful of suited allies. I stepped up to the podium, heart pounding. Marcus streamed the whole thing live. I laid out the evidence piece by piece. Cash exchanges, falsified documents, threats to homeowners. And then, the biggest bombshell, Daniel Marks' betrayal, with text messages and voice recordings to prove it. The room erupted. Crane's allies scrambled to defend him. Margaret's face twisted with fury. But the damage was done. Police officers entered quietly and arrested Margaret on corruption charges. Crane's lobbying efforts were suspended pending investigation. Daniel Marks fled the city, his betrayal exposed. As I left the chambers, people surrounded me, thanking me, shaking my hand, some even crying. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of peace. Justice wasn't perfect. It wasn't always clean, but it was possible. And as I walked away with Kilo by my side, I knew this was only the beginning. There would always be new battles, new shadows to chase. But I was ready. The dust didn't settle overnight. Brighton Heights was a community fractured, raw, and unsure of what came next. The city council suspended the zoning plans, but the damage was done. Families had lost trust. Some homes had already been foreclosed or sold under pressure, and the scars ran deep. I spent weeks helping neighbors navigate the complicated process of reclaiming their properties, negotiating with banks, and understanding their rights. Jessica Tran became my closest ally, organizing community meetings and volunteer legal clinics. One afternoon, as we sat in a makeshift community center, a frail older man named Mr. Henderson approached me. He held out a small wooden box. "Lucas," he said quietly, "this belonged to my late wife. She was one of the first to speak out against. Karen, it's time it's in the right hands." Inside was a collection of letters and photographs documenting years of HOA abuse. That moment reminded me why I fought so hard. Not for headlines or revenge, but for people like Mr. Henderson, who deserved peace. The media spotlight faded, but the work didn't. Rebuilding a community takes time, patience, and trust. It takes listening, healing, and sometimes forgiveness. I still live on the outskirts, my land untouched by HOA maps, but I'm no longer just a bystander. I'm part of this ongoing story. Kilo lies beside me now, tired but alert. The sun sets over the hills. And though the future is uncertain, I know one thing. Justice may be messy, slow, and imperfect, but it's worth every battle. Months had passed since the city council showdown. Brighton Heights was quieter now, but the silence was uneasy. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones inside your own head. I found myself staring at the horizon more than usual, wondering if this life, this fight, was what I wanted. Could I ever really leave the past behind? Or was I destined to be the guy who chased shadows forever? One evening, Jessica stopped by with news. There's talk of a new HOA forming, nearby. Smaller, tighter knit, but with people from Crane's Circle involved. My stomach twisted. The cycle was starting again. I realized then that justice isn't a finish line. It's a constant vigilance, but I wasn't alone anymore. The community had found its voice, and I had found a purpose. As Kilo rested his head on my lap, I made a silent promise. No matter how many shadows rose, I'd stand ready. Because some fights, the right fights, are never really over. The warning about the new HOA wasn't just idle gossip. Within weeks, I started hearing whispers from neighbors about unfair rules, sudden fees, and a board that acted more like overlords than servants. It was Brighton Heights 2.0, and this time they'd learned some lessons. But so had I. I reached out quietly, connecting with a small group of residents already organizing. This time, it wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about building something better. We drafted fair bylaws, held open forums, created transparent financial systems, and slowly trust began to return. Change isn't easy. It's messy. It requires showing up, speaking out, and sometimes stepping into the fire again. One morning, I watched Kilo chase squirrels in the yard. I thought about the long road behind me, the fights, the losses, the victories, and I felt something rare, hope. Because maybe, just maybe, justice isn't just about revenge. It's about building a future where everyone has a place to call home. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that future was possible. As the dust finally settled over Brighton Heights, I stood on my porch, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon, Kilo at my side and the neighborhood buzzing quietly with newfound hope. The battle had been long, messy, and painful. Corruption exposed, betrayals unveiled, and justice fought for not just with words, but with grit. But this victory wasn't just about revenge against people like Karen or Margaret. It was about reclaiming a place where families could live without fear, where voices mattered, and where the shadows of power no longer ruled. And though I knew the fight for fairness would never truly be over, in that moment, with the cool breeze whispering promises of change, I realized something. Sometimes standing up, refusing to back down, and believing in justice is the most powerful legacy anyone can leave behind.